They forced the human girl to dance so the royal court could laugh, but by the final step, the Alpha King was no longer sitting on his throne. Elowen Vale stood barefoot at the center of Frostmere Citadel's moonstone ballroom, surrounded by wolves who wore diamonds, silver masks, and smiles sharp enough to cut. She had entered the hall as a servant, carrying a tray of winter wine with both hands steady, her plain ivory dress borrowed from the laundry and still smelling faintly of soap. She was supposed to pour, bow, disappear, and return to the servants' corridor before the midnight choosing began. Human girls did not belong beneath the crystal chandeliers. Human girls did not stand where noble daughters waited to be seen by King Caedric Blackthorne. Human girls were breakable things, useful only until a stronger hand dismissed them. Lady Vespra Morcant made certain everyone remembered that. She glided forward in a gown of black velvet and moon pearls, her pale smile soft enough to fool strangers and cruel enough to silence friends. "Since the little human keeps staring at our royal floor," Vespra said, lifting her voice for the court, "let her entertain us before the real Luna candidates begin." Laughter moved through the ballroom like cold wind under a door. Someone called Elowen scentless. Someone else asked if humans could even hear music without a wolf inside them. Elowen lowered the empty tray to a nearby table. Her hands did not shake until she hid them in the folds of her skirt. She could have refused. She could have run. But running from wolves only taught them to chase. So she stepped forward. Not for Vespra. Not for the court. For the mother who once held her in a candlelit kitchen and whispered, "If the world cages you, Elowen, remember the one thing they cannot command." The musicians began with a mocking tune, light and pretty and meant to make her stumble. Elowen closed her eyes. One breath.
Two.
Then her feet moved into a pattern older than memory. The room changed before anyone understood why. Her first turn scattered silver light across the floor. Her second softened the music until the violins sounded like wind over a frozen lake. By the third, every candle flame leaned toward her. Elowen did not dance like a servant begging to be spared. She danced like a girl remembering the sky after years underground. Her plain skirt spun around her ankles, her white hair ribbon came loose, and moonlight poured over her pale face until she looked less human and more like a secret the kingdom had buried too deep. The laughter died. One by one, the wolves stopped smiling. At the end of the hall, King Caedric Blackthorne rose slowly from his obsidian throne. He had not moved all night, not for Vespra, not for the council, not for the noble daughters waiting with lowered lashes and perfect curtsies. But now his golden eyes locked on Elowen as if the entire world had narrowed to one impossible truth. The air grew heavy. Guards lowered their heads. The music faltered. Elowen opened her eyes just as a pale crescent shimmered beneath the skin of her wrist, bright and delicate as trapped moonfire. A sound came from Caedric's chest, low, shaken, almost broken. The court froze. Vespra went white. Elowen stopped dancing, breathless, confused, suddenly aware that every wolf in the kingdom was staring at her. Then the Alpha King stepped down from the throne and whispered the one word that turned her humiliation into destiny. Mate. The word mate did not save Elowen. It made every wolf in the ballroom turn on her. One breath ago, she had been nothing but a human servant with bare feet on forbidden stone. Now noble women pressed jeweled hands to their mouths, guards reached for their blades, and Lady Vespra Morcant stared at her as if Elowen had stolen the moon from the sky. Elowen did not understand the word the way wolves understood it. To her, mate was something whispered between bonded couples, something sacred, something impossible for a girl with no wolf, no scent, and no pack. She took one step back, but the crescent beneath her wrist pulsed again, pale and soft, answering the Alpha King before she could. King Caedric Blackthorne stood at the foot of the throne steps, utterly still, yet the whole room seemed to lean away from him. His golden eyes were fixed on her wrist, then on her face, and for the first time, since Elowen had been dragged into Frostmere Citadel 6 winters ago, someone looked at her as if she was not furniture, not a mistake, not a fragile human thing waiting to be broken. That should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her. because Elowen Vale had survived by being unseen. She had been 12 when the border village of Harrowfen burned under a winter moon, not in flames bright enough to remember clearly, but in smoke, shouting, and the sound of hooves on frozen mud. A royal patrol found her 3 miles from the ruins wrapped in her mother's gray cloak, clutching a silver hair ribbon and refusing to tell anyone her last words. The wolves brought her to Frostmere as a ward of mercy, but mercy had a cold face in a royal citadel. She was given a cot near the laundry fires, a servant dress, and a rule that followed her everywhere. Be useful, be quiet, be grateful. At 15, she scrubbed corridors until her knees ached. At 17, she learned which nobles liked their wine warm and which ones liked to make girls cry for sport. At 22, she could cross the entire citadel carrying a tray of glass cups without spilling a drop, even while wolves laughed about how breakable human bones must be. But she was not weak. When kitchen boys stole bread from younger maids, Elowen stole it back. When orphan cubs cried in the lower nursery, she sang old human lullabies through the door until they slept. When Mira Ashwick arrived trembling from the western farms, Elowen gave her the warmer blanket and pretended she preferred the cold. The only thing Elowen kept for herself was the dance. Her mother had taught it in secret, barefoot on packed earth, moving slowly beneath candlelight. Never under a full moon, her mother had warned. Never where wolves can see. Elowen had thought it was superstition. Now, as the ballroom stared and Caedric took one silent step toward her, she realized her mother had been afraid of this exact moment. Lady Vespera's voice cut through the silence, sweet and poisonous. Your Majesty, she is human. Whatever this is, it is a trick. Elowen lifted her chin before fear could bend it. I did not ask for your throne, your bond, or your attention. The words shook, but they did not break. Caedric's expression changed, not softer, but deeper, as if her courage had struck something locked inside him. Then the moonstone floor beneath Elowen's feet began to glow, and from under the ancient silver circle, a hidden symbol rose like light waking from a grave. The hidden symbol burned brighter than every chandelier in Frostmere Citadel, and the wolves who had laughed at Elowen began stepping backward, as if the floor itself had chosen her side. It was not a picture she understood. It looked like a crescent moon wrapped around a thorned crown, drawn in silver light beneath her bare feet. But the royal court understood enough to be afraid. The music stopped completely. The great fireplace along the northern wall sank into blue embers. Even the hunting hounds sleeping beside the pillars lifted their heads and tucked their tails low. Then King Caedric Blackthorne moved, and the ballroom remembered who ruled it. He did not shout. He did not reach for the black sword at his side. He simply walked down the last step from the throne, and every wolf between him and Elowen lowered their eyes. It was like watching a storm take human form, silent, controlled, and impossible to turn away. His black ceremonial coat brushed the moonstone floor, his crown cast sharp shadows over his pale face, and his golden eyes never left Elowen. She wanted to run, but her body would not obey. Not because he held her there, but because something inside her had gone still for the first time in her life. The hollow place where she had always felt alone was no longer empty. It was answering him. Lady Vespera recovered first, because pride was the last thing cruel people surrendered. She stepped into Caedric's path with a perfect curtsy, her voice polished and trembling at the edges. Your Majesty, the girl has triggered an old ward. Nothing more. The council can remove her before the ceremony is ruined. Caedric stopped. He did not look at Vespera. Somehow that was worse than anger. Move. One word. Quiet enough to be mistaken for mercy. Final enough that half the court forgot to breathe. Vespera's smile cracked, but she stepped aside. Lord Alaric Greymont rose from the council seats, his silver robes sweeping behind him like frost over stone. My king, you must not approach her. Human blood cannot awaken a royal mark unless it has been altered. She may be carrying a curse meant for your line. The word curse rolled through the ballroom, hungry for panic. Elowen felt it reach for her, felt the old familiar shame trying to wrap around her throat. Human, scentless, breakable, dangerous now, because they could no longer call her useless. She looked at Caedric and forced herself to speak before fear stole the choice from her. I do not know what that mark is.
I do not know why it answered me.
But I did not come here to deceive anyone. Her voice echoed under the glass ceiling, small but clear. I came here to serve wine and survive the night. Something changed in Caedric's face. Not pity, recognition. As if those words touched a wound he had hidden beneath a crown for years. He lifted one hand, palm open, stopping 6 feet away from her.
Close enough for the bond to pull.
Far enough to let her breathe. Elowen Vale, he said, and the sound of her name in his voice made the moonlit floor pulse again. Who taught you that dance? The question struck harder than an accusation. Her mother's warning flashed through her mind. Never under a full moon. Never where wolves can see. Elowen swallowed and shook her head. No one you can punish. A low murmur swept through the court, but Caedric's eyes darkened with something almost like respect. Before he could answer, the silver symbol beneath Elowen split open into a second line of light, pointing not toward the throne, but toward the sealed doors of the forbidden West Wing. Deep inside the citadel, something ancient woke and knocked once from the other side. The knock from the forbidden West Wing rolled through Frostmere Citadel like a heartbeat buried inside the walls. Every wolf in the ballroom heard it, and every noble face went pale. Elowen had scrubbed those sealed doors for 6 years without ever seeing them open. Servants whispered that the West Wing held the Alpha King's private chambers, cursed relics, and the names of queens the kingdom. Wanted forgotten. Now the silver line beneath her feet pointed straight toward it, as if the ancient stones had been waiting for her to dance. Lord Greymont stepped forward too quickly. Seal the hall, he ordered the guards. Take the human girl below until the council can examine what she has done. 2 guards moved before Caedric even turned his head. The air changed. Not loudly. Not violently. It tightened, deep and cold, until the guards stopped with one boot lifted from the floor. Caedric's voice was quiet. Touch her, and you answer to me. The guards lowered their eyes at once. Elowen should have felt relieved, but fear still pressed beneath her ribs. Protection from a king was dangerous. It made enemies out of everyone who wanted him controlled. Vespra watched from behind her silver fan, hatred hidden behind perfect manners. Greymont's mouth flattened into a line. Caedric finally looked at Elowen, and for the first time his power did not feel like a storm coming for her. It felt like a wall rising between her and the room. You will come with me, he said. Elowen lifted her chin, though her voice came out thin. Am I being arrested? A flicker crossed his golden eyes. No, then I walk. I am not dragged. The court murmured at the boldness of it. A human servant correcting the Alpha King should have been unthinkable. Caedric did not punish her. He stepped aside, giving her the path first. Then walk. That single choice stole the breath from half the ballroom. Elowen moved toward the West Wing with bare feet, a loose ribbon trailing over one shoulder, and the most feared king in the Northern Territories following close enough to shield her, but not close enough to claim. The sealed doors opened before his hand touched them. Cold air poured out, carrying the scent of old paper, winter roses, and something silver Elowen could almost remember. Inside, the West Wing was not a dungeon. It was a forgotten palace within the palace, long corridors lined with covered mirrors, moonlit windows, and portraits turned toward the wall. Caedric dismissed the guards at the threshold. When they hesitated, his eyes flashed. Leave us. Elowen wrapped her arms around herself. You should not be alone with me if they think I am cursed. I have lived with curses longer than you have lived with fear, he said. The words were not cruel. They were tired. For a moment, the Alpha King looked less like a legend and more like a man who had survived too much silence. He led her into a circular library where ancient books rose 20 feet high and a glass ceiling held the full moon like a watching eye. The dance, he said. Who taught you? Elowen looked at the shelves, at the dust, at the moonlight. My mother. She said it was the only inheritance no one could steal. What was her name? Elowen hesitated. Speaking it felt like opening a grave with her bare hands.
Serafini Vale.
Caedric went completely still. The bond between them pulled once, sharp and bright. He turned toward a covered frame hanging above the cold fireplace and removed the black cloth. Dust drifted through the moonlight. Elowen forgot how to breathe. The painting showed a woman in a silver gown, one hand lifted mid-dance, a crescent mark glowing on her wrist. The face was older, regal, and sorrowful, but unmistakable. It was Elowen's face, painted decades before she was born. The painting should have been impossible, but Elowen knew that face better than any mirror she had ever owned. Same pale skin, same gray eyes, same curve of the mouth her mother once kissed before sending her into hiding under a winter moon. The woman in the silver gown looked like Elowen, only crowned by sorrow and moonlight, with one hand lifted in the final step of the dance. Beneath the portrait, carved into the old frame, were words in a language Elowen had never learned but somehow understood, as if they had been sleeping in her bones. Last daughter of Moonveil, true Luna of the Northern Crown. Caedric stood beside her without speaking, yet his silence filled the library more heavily than any command. The fire in the cold hearth sparked to life by itself, blue and silver, throwing shadows over shelves of forbidden records. Elowen reached toward the inscription, then stopped before touching it. "This is not me," she whispered. "I am human." Caedric looked at her wrist, where the crescent mark glowed faintly beneath her skin. "No human has ever awakened the Moonveil seal." "Then the seal is wrong. The moon does not lie." His voice was low, but there was no victory in it, only awe and something that sounded dangerously close to fear. Elowen turned on him, the ache in her chest sharper than anger. "Everyone in this castle has called me weak for 6 years. Scentless, breakable, a servant lucky to sleep near the laundry fires. Now one dance changes my blood." Caedric did not move closer. He let her anger have space.
"No."
One dance revealed what someone buried. The words landed like a door opening in the dark. Caedric crossed to a locked cabinet and pressed his signet ring against the black iron seal. The doors opened with a soft, ancient click. Inside lay a book bound in white leather, its cover marked with the same crescent and thorned crown. When he opened it, the pages turned by themselves until they stopped on an illustration of a woman dancing beneath a full moon, surrounded by kneeling wolves. The Silver Veil dance was never entertainment, Caedric said. It was the Luna rite, a royal awakening used only by the Moonveil bloodline. Elowen stared at the page. The steps were her mother's steps. The warning was her mother's voice. Never under a full moon. Never where wolves can see. Why would my mother teach me this if it could expose me? Because she believed one day you would need to remember who you were. His answer was quiet enough to hurt. Elowen backed away until her shoulders met the edge of the table. Memories rose like mist. Her mother hiding the silver ribbon beneath floorboards. Her mother burning letters before dawn. Her mother making Elowen repeat a false name whenever strangers came near. A childhood built from love and fear. Caedric lifted his hand slowly, palm open. "May I see your mark?" The question startled her more than any order could have. He was the Alpha King. Every stone in Frostmere obeyed him. Yet he asked. Elowen looked at his hand, then at his face. The bond between them trembled, warm and terrifying, not pulling like a chain, but waiting like a promise. She gave him her wrist.
His fingers closed around
it gently, as if touching a sacred thing that might vanish. The moment their skin met, the library doors slammed shut, the blue fire surged, and the crescent mark bloomed brighter. A second mark appeared beneath it, a tiny silver veil wrapped around a black crown. Caedric inhaled sharply. Elowen felt his wolf answer through the bond, not hungry, not wild, but kneeling. Outside the library, hidden behind a cracked mirror in the corridor, Lady Vespera watched everything with hatred in her eyes. She turned to Lord Greymont, who had arrived without a sound. His face had lost all color. "Then it is true," Vespera whispered. Greymont's hand tightened around the silver cane at his side. "The human girl survived the night we killed her mother." By dawn, the secret had already been turned into a weapon. Elowen left the West Wing with Caedric at her side, her wrist wrapped in a strip of plain white cloth, not to hide the mark from shame, but to stop every passing wolf from staring as if her skin had become a royal decree. The citadel corridors that once ignored her now bent around her in frightened silence. Servants stepped back. Guards lowered their eyes. Noble women whispered behind gloved hands. She had spent 6 years being invisible, and suddenly attention felt like a blade held too close to her throat. Caedric walked beside her without touching her, but his presence was a shield no one dared test. "Stay near me," he said quietly. Elowen looked straight ahead. "Because I am in danger?" "Because they are." Before she could answer, the great bells of Frostmere Citadel began to ring. Not the silver bells of ceremony, the iron bells of accusation. Doors opened across the palace. Wolves flooded toward the royal hall. At the far end of the corridor, Lord Greymont appeared in his council robes, pale and composed, with Lady Vespera standing beside him like a black swan beside frozen water. "Your Majesty," Greymont called, loud enough for the gathering court to hear, "by ancient law, I accuse Elowen Vale of awakening forbidden magic against the Northern Crown." The words spread faster than fire. Curse-bearer, human witch, false mate. Elowen felt the old labels crawling back. Only sharper now because fear had replaced mockery. Caedric stepped forward, and the nearest wolves flinched. "Choose your next words carefully." Greymont bowed, but his eyes were cold. "I choose the law, my king. If the girl is innocent, let her stand before the moon trial." The royal hall opened around them, vast and cruel beneath banners of black and silver. Elowen saw Mira Ashwick near the servants' doors, trembling between 2 council guards. Something inside Elowen tightened. "Why is she here?" Vespera smiled softly. "Your little friend has confessed that you practice strange rituals in the laundry rooms." Myra's face crumpled. "Elowen, I am sorry. They said they would send my brother to the border mines if I refused." The hall went silent, hungry for Elowen's reaction. They expected tears. They expected begging. They expected a human girl to break in the exact shape they had prepared for her. Elowen turned toward the council dais and lifted her chin. "Mira lied because you frightened her. Punish me if you must, but leave her family out of this." Caedric's golden eyes flashed, and for one dangerous second the torches bent toward him as if the whole room feared his anger. Yet Elowen placed herself between him and the council before he could move. She did not know where the courage came from, only that it felt like her mother's hand at her back. "No," she whispered to him. "If you destroy them for me, they will call me the curse that broke your crown."
His jaw tightened.
"I can end this." "I know." Her voice softened. "That is why I am asking you not to." The bond between them trembled, full of storm and restraint. Caedric could have taken her from the hall. He could have silenced every noble with one command. Instead, he looked at Elowen as if her choice mattered more than his rage. "What do you want?" She turned toward the silver circle at the center of the hall, the same ancient moonstone that had awakened beneath her dance. "I want the truth to fear me less than they do." Vanished behind red clouds, and the silver beneath her feet began to burn with light. The silver light did not touch Elowen like fire. It touched her like judgment. It rose around her in a perfect circle, bright enough to erase the faces of the court, cold enough to make her breath turn white in the royal hall. Somewhere beyond the glow, Caedric said her name, and the sound struck the bond between them like a hand against glass.
She wanted to look at him.
She wanted to step out of the circle and hide behind the only power in the room that had ever chosen to protect her. But the moonstone beneath her feet tightened, and Elowen understood with a terror deeper than fear that the trial had not been built to test her. It had been built to end the last woman who could expose it. Lord Greymont lifted his silver cane, his voice smooth over the rising panic. "Let the moon reveal the truth." Lady Vespera stood beside him, beautiful and still, but her eyes glittered with victory. The light climbed higher around Elowen, folding inward like a cage. The court watched from behind its safe distance, every wolf waiting to see whether the human girl would shatter. Elowen closed her eyes. Her mother's voice came back through years of cold corridors and servant beds. "When they cage your body, let your soul move first. So Elowen moved. One bare foot slid across the moonstone. Then the other. The first step hurt only because she was afraid. The second carried the memory of a candlelit kitchen. By the third, the silver circle changed. It stopped closing around her and began turning with her. Gasps broke through the hall. Elowen lifted her arms, not to please them, not to beg the moon, but to remember. The dance was no longer delicate. It was a key. With every turn, the floor released pieces of the past. A woman in a gray cloak running through snow with an infant against her heart. They were staring at the truth with the horror of men who had served lies for years. The light surged too high, and Elowen stumbled. The circle pulled at her strength, trying to turn memory into silence again. Caedric moved then. The doors of the royal hall flew open behind him, though no hand touched them. Wind swept through the banners. His wolf's power filled the chamber, vast and furious, and every noble dropped their gaze. Yet he did not break the circle around Elowen. He stopped at its edge, fists clenched, jaw tight with restraint. "Tell me what you need," he said. "Not mine. Not obey. Not stand back. Tell me what you need." Elowen met his eyes through the silver storm, and the fear inside her steadied. "The book," she whispered. "The Moonveil record from the West Wing." Caedric turned once, and Mira Ashwick, pale but brave, slipped from the servant's door carrying the white leather book Elowen had seen in the library. She must have followed. She must have risked everything, not a punishment of pain. A witness mark, ancient and undeniable, sealing him in the truth he had spent 22 years burying. Lady Vespera's perfect face had gone still, all its beauty sharpened by fear. The stolen moon pearls at her throat flickered once, then dimmed, as if they had recognized their false owner. Elowen stood in the center of the hall, breath unsteady, the white leather book pressed to her chest. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt 12 years old again, wrapped in her mother's cloak, running from a past she had never been allowed to name. Caedric crossed the hall toward her, and this time no council lord stepped in his path. The torches bent away from him. The banners snapped in a wind no window had let in. Yet when he reached the edge of the circle, he stopped and waited. "Elowen," he said, low enough that only she and the front rows could hear. "May I enter?" The question broke something open inside her. A king asking permission in a room where everyone had once ordered her to kneel. She nodded. The circle allowed him through. He came to her slowly, his golden eyes never leaving her face, and the bond between them softened from storm into warmth. He did not take the book from her. He did not touch her mark. He simply stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, facing the kingdom that had mistaken silence for weakness. "Lord Greymont," Caedric said, his voice carrying to the farthest wall, "you forged royal records, hid the Moonveil heir, and placed a false Luna candidate before my throne." Greymont's composure shattered. "I protected the crown from human blood." Elowen lifted her chin. "You feared my mother because she would not let you control the crown through her." The mist above them changed again. Seraphine Vale appeared, not as a victim in memory, but as a Luna in full light, placing a sleeping child into a human woman's arms. "Protect my daughter," she whispered, "until the moon calls her home." A sound moved through the court, not laughter now, not mockery, but recognition. One by one, the royal wolves began to bow. First the older guards, then the servants near the walls, then the noble houses that had spent years pretending blood mattered more than truth. Even the orphan cubs from the lower nursery slipped into the doorway and lowered their small heads, as if they had known her kindness before the moon proved her name. Vespera reached for her necklace, but the pearls fell apart into dull gray beads across the floor. "She is still human," she whispered. Elowen looked at her calmly. "Then perhaps a human girl had more honor than your whole council." The words landed cleanly, and no one laughed. Caedric turned to the throne, then did the unthinkable. The Alpha King of Frostmere went down on one knee before the servant they had tried to shame. Gasps swept the hall like thunder over snow. "The crown recognizes you," he said. "The bond calls to you, but I will not claim what has not chosen me." His voice roughened. Elowen Vale, last daughter of Moonveil, the choice is yours. The court waited for her to accept the crown, the bond, the apology of a kingdom that only saw her once power forced its eyes open. Elowen looked at the bowed nobles, then at Mira, then at the moonlit memory of her mother fading above the hall. At last, she faced Caedric and spoke with a voice that did not shake. I will not be chosen by a kingdom that first refuses to hear my name. Elowen's refusal did what no army had ever done to Frostmere. It made the throne room bow without knowing how to rise again. Caedric remained on one knee before her, not wounded by her answer, not angered by the pride in it. If anything, the look in his golden eyes deepened, as if the bond between them had grown stronger because she had not surrendered to it blindly. Then they will hear it, he said. His voice carried across the hall, calm and absolute. Before any crown is offered, before any bond is completed, before any noble house speaks her title, this kingdom will speak her name. He rose and turned to the court, and the old fear of him returned to every face, but Elowen felt something different beneath it now. Not rage. Justice held on a leash. Silverthorn Vale will be restored to the royal records as true Luna of the Northern Crown. Every servant bound by false debt inside this citadel will be freed by sunrise. Every human family under royal protection will be protected by law, not pity. And every council seat held by forged blood will be emptied. Lord Greymont's cane slipped from his hand and struck the moonstone with a hollow sound. Lady Vespera stood frozen among the ruined pearls at her feet, no longer the chosen jewel of the court, only a woman dressed in power that had never belonged to her. Elowen looked around the hall where she had once been ordered to pour wine in silence. Mira was crying near the servant doors. The orphaned cubs watched her with wide, shining eyes. The guards who had ignored her for years now waited for her command. But Elowen did not feel taller because they bowed. She felt taller because she did not need their bowing to know she had survived. 3 nights later, beneath a clear full moon, Frostmere opened its western garden for the first free Moonveil ceremony in 22 years. No one forced Elowen to stand in the silver circle. No one laughed when she removed her shoes and stepped onto the cold stone. She wore no stolen jewels, no heavy crown, only a white gown, her mother's gray cloak, and the silver ribbon that had survived with her from Harrowfen. Caedric waited at the edge of the circle in black formal dress, broad shoulders still as midnight, his crown absent by choice. He had told her earlier that kings were obeyed, but mates were chosen, and he would rather be chosen as a man than accepted as a throne. So Elowen danced, not to prove her blood, not to awaken a hidden seal, not to survive a trial. She danced because her mother had loved her, because fear had failed to bury her, because the girl who once slept beside the laundry fires had found the sky again. The bond warmed with every step, patient and bright. When the final turn brought her before Caedric, he did not reach for her. He waited. Elowen placed her hand in his. I choose you, she whispered, because you saw me before the moon proved me. The crescent on her wrist met the shadowed mark on his palm, and the mate bond opened like dawn over snow. Around them, wolves lowered their heads, not to a hidden human, not to a frightened servant, but to Luna Elowen Vale of Moonveil, chosen by the moon and choosing for herself. Far beyond Frostmere, across a black sea beneath a crownless mountain, another ancient mark awakened in the dark. A Leaken king older than the northern throne opened his eyes and smiled. The Moonveil Luna had risen, and something from the old world had heard her dance.